Chapter 1. From the kitchen came a piercing scream. The green-colored pencil slipped, streaking across the almost finished portrait of a lizard Jaime Rivera had been working on for the last half hour. As he jumped to his feet, a wave of dizziness hit him, left over from the fever that had kept him home from school that morning. It took a second for his vision to clear, his hand braced on the sill of the glassless window that no longer held the posing lizard. He took a deep breath before bursting into the kitchen. The wailing only grew louder. No, 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 please no, he thought. It couldn't be. It couldn't. It had to be something else. Please, Kay? Jaime stopped short. Mama was slumped on the plastic table, crying into her arms. Papa stood behind her, with a hand on her back. Despite his quiet stance, his broad shoulders were hunched, making him look as distraught as Mama. At the sound of Jaime's entrance, Mama looked up. Streaks of black, brown, and tan covered her normally perfectly made-up face. She beckoned him closer, pulled him onto her lap, and held him as if he were 2 instead of 12. Papa's strong arms encircled both of them. For a second, Jaime allowed himself to melt into his parents' embrace, but only for a second. Dread twisted his stomach into a knot. It had happened, something he'd feared for a long time. He had convinced himself with all his might that it couldn't happen, because he didn't have anything to offer them. But they obviously disagreed. They had made that clear 2 weeks ago, if only he were wrong, and it wasn't that at all. The incident that had happened 2 weeks ago came back to him. His former friend, Pulgita, had called over Jaime and his cousin Miguel as they were walking home from school. What does he want? Jaime had muttered under his breath. I don't know, but at least he's alone. Miguel looked up and down the street before crossing it. Jaime double-checked as well. Good. They weren't around. Miguel stopped a few meters away from the boy. Jaime folded his arms across his chest, keeping more distance between himself and his former friend. Pulgita leaned against a deteriorating cinder block wall. His slick black hair gave him a look of a little boy pretending to be his papa. 14 and unlikely to grow anymore, Pulgita was still a head shorter than Jaime and Miguel, who were 2 years younger. But his height wasn't the only reason he went by the name that meant little flea. Okay? Miguel asked, barely opening his mouth. Pulgita threw his hands in the air as if he didn't understand the hostility and laughed. Even at Jaime's distance, he caught a whiff of cigarette and alcohol breath. Can a boy say hi to his old friends? No, both Miguel and Jaime answered. Not when the boy was Pulgita. Not when he had become one of them. Until last year, Jaime and Miguel had played with a tiny, dirty boy. Then things started going missing. First bananas from the backyard and tortillas wrapped in a dish towel. Later new shoes and Jaime's drawing charcoals that had been a birthday present. Jaime and Miguel had stopped inviting Pulgita to their houses, and the little flea had found new friends. Now, Pulgita's clothes were immaculate, from his white sleeveless undershirt and blue football shorts to his white socks stretched tight to his calves and white Nike high tops. Everything he had on was new and expensive. To prove it, he pulled out his flashy iPhone and twirled it around in his palm, making sure the cousins noticed. Oh, Jaime noticed it. The only phone anyone in his family could afford belonged to Tio Daniel, Miguel's papa. He shared it with Jaime's family and other relatives, but there was nothing fancy or smart about it, just one of those old flip ones. Pulgita turned to Jaime with a sly grin. I saw your mommy the other day, carrying a heavy laundry basket. Looks like that leg is still bothering her. You leave Tia out of this. Miguel took a step closer, his eyes glaring at him. Pulgita ignored the threat as he continued showing off the fancy phone. Sure would be nice, wouldn't it, if she didn't have to work so hard? If she could relax in front of La Tele with her leg up. You two were always nice to me. I'd like to help you out, you know? We don't need your help, Jaime said. But in the back of his mind, he was intrigued. Mama had been a teenager when she had broken her leg, and it had been set incorrectly. Her limp was barely noticeable when she walked, but the injury kept her from jobs that required standing or sitting all day. She earned next to nothing washing and ironing clothes for rich ladies. Papa made barely enough of the chocolate plantation to keep them fed and sheltered in their small house that consisted of 2 small rooms, a sleeping one and a kitchen. The outhouse was, well, outside. If they had extra money, just a tiny bit more, maybe his parents wouldn't need to work so hard. Maybe they could live better, but not by earning money the way Pulgita offered. It wouldn't be worth it. Right? Pulgita's smile widened as if he were mocking them. You'll change your mind. Someday you'll want our help. Our help. The words pounded repeatedly in Jaime's head. His stomach twisted at the thought of what Pulgita and his new friends expected. in exchange for help. Not until your farts smell like jasmine, Miguel assured him. Jaime nodded. He couldn't do anything else. With a shrug, Pulgita tapped a code on his phone before bringing it to his ear, stuffed the other hand deep into his pocket, and swaggered away. Jaime had tried to put the confrontation with Pulgita out of his mind, until now, in the kitchen, with his mama wailing and both of his parents smothering him. Something was wrong, horribly wrong, and he had a feeling he knew what. His body tensed up to break free, but Mama's grip only got tighter. Ay, Jaime, mi angel, she said, between her cries. What would I do without you? Mama released him. Her dark eyes were puffy and red. Her black wavy hair hung in tangled wet clumps around her face. Jaime brushed a strand away from her eyes, something she used to do for him when he was younger and feeling upset. She took 2 deep breaths and stared into Jaime's brown eyes. It's Miguel. Jaime scrambled out of his mama's lap. Papa reached out for him, but he jerked away. The dizziness that had almost overcome Jaime in the bedroom threatened to overtake him again. Miguel just has the flu, Jaime tried to convince himself. After all, Jaime had been pretty feverish this morning too. That's it, just a bad flu. But that didn't explain Mama's crying, why she looked at him like it would be the last time. What's happened? The words choked him. Mama averted her makeup-streaked red eyes. He's dead. No, because even though he had guessed the possibility, it couldn't be true. Not Miguel, not his brave cousin, not his best friend. He was walking through Parque de San Jose after school, and Mama took a deep breath. The alphas surrounded him. Of course, them. Jaime wrapped his arms tightly around himself, desperate to stop the shaking that had taken over his body. His sore throat from this morning made it impossible to swallow or breathe. Parque de San Jose, he and Miguel cut across the small park every day, twice a day, on their way to school and back. At night it was filled with drunks and druggies, but during the day, with everyone else who walked through it, it had always felt safe enough. Had. Not anymore. Did they? How? Kay? Jaime stumbled over the words. His mind had gone blurry. A fresh wave of tears overtook Mama. When she couldn't answer, Papa said the words she couldn't. 6 or 7 gang members approached him, including Pulgita. Jaime cringed. Of course, Pulgita. If this was the puny, stinking pest's idea of helping. Papa pressed his fingers against the bridge of his prominent nose before he continued. Herman Domingo was walking by. He saw everything. The alphas told Miguel he'd be an asset to the gang and should join them. Miguel told them to leave him alone. That's when they started hitting him. Stop. Jaime didn't want to know more. He could see the alpha gang members in his head, some big and burly, some lean and quick, and Pulgita, small enough to be squashed, all of them punching and kicking until Miguel fell to the ground. If only Jaime had been there. There was no stopping them, Papa said, as if he'd read Jaime's mind. If Herman or anyone had interfered, they would have put a bullet in his head, like they did to Jose Adolfo Torres, Santiago Ruiz. Though Jaime stopped listening because he knew the names. Older boys he'd gone to school with, grown men with wives and children, people who tried to stand up to the violent gang, people who were now dead, muerto, like Miguel. His cousin had come over that morning, his face with its lopsided smile ecstatic over his scholarship into the exclusive science provocational school in the city 20 kilometers away. He had always wanted to be an engineer. His disappointment that Jaime was sick and couldn't walk to school with him disappeared as Miguel counted all the people he had to tell his good news to. Guilt blazed in Jaime's chest as he gasped for air. Why Miguel? Why not him? The room suddenly didn't seem to have enough of it, even with the humid breeze coming from the glassless windows. His fault. The gang had a strong presence in their small Guatemalan village and other villages in the area. Kids younger than Jaime were addicted to the cocaine the alphas supplied. Shopkeepers were asked to pay the alphas for protection. The protection they offered was for themselves. Protection from being robbed or killed if refused. Miguel. Jaime crouched down on the bare dirt floor, hiding his face in his arms. If only he hadn't been sick this morning. If he had walked through the park with Miguel like always. Could he have stopped them from attacking? 2 against 6 was better than 1 against 6. Except Jaime had never been good at fighting. Would it have been easier to give in? Become the gang's newest member? Sell drugs on street corners? Demand insurance from villagers? Kill anyone who refused or got in his way? No. He couldn't have done things like that. But he wouldn't have been able to stand up to the alphas either. He'd never been brave like his cousin. Here, Mama's voice said softly. Jaime looked up from his crumpled spot on the floor. Mama had put the coffee on the stove and cleaned herself up. Her eyes were still red, but now she just looked tired and old. She offered him sweet and milky cafe con leche, like it would help. Still, he held the cup, wrapping his hands around the ceramic mug as if it were a cold day instead of a suffocating one. He took a deep breath, after all. He'd been with Miguel that day when Pulgita had made his offer. Will I be next? His parents didn't look at him. Mama started crying again, and Papa shook his head. Jaime got his answer. I don't want to die, but I don't want to kill people either. What can I do? He asked the coffee cup in his hands like a fortune-telling bruja might do with tea leaves. Neither the coffee nor his parents answered him. There was nothing he could do. No one escaped the Alphas.